Most people who visit Australia spend their time in the same 5 cities: Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Cairns, Perth. And those cities are great. But here is what the travel brochures don't tell you. Some of the most extraordinary places in this country are the ones that don't make the cover. Towns where the lake turns cobalt blue every November and no one can fully explain why. Towns built almost entirely underground, where half the residents sleep beneath the desert. Towns that were once the richest places in Australia, bigger, wealthier, and more powerful than Melbourne, and are now so quiet you can hear your own footsteps on their granite streets. I've spent time in all 10 of these places, and every single one of them left me with the same feeling. Why doesn't anyone talk about this? Today we're changing that. And these are 10 Australian towns you've almost certainly never heard of. And once you hear what makes each one extraordinary, you're going to want to visit every single one. Let's get into it. Number 10. Yamba, New South Wales. Let's start with the one that insiders have been guarding jealously for decades. Yamba sits at the mouth of the Clarence River on the New South Wales north coast, about 670 kilometres north of Sydney and just under 3 hours south of Brisbane. Population around 6,400 people. In the holiday season, that number triples. And the people who've been coming here for 30 years would very much prefer that you didn't know about it. In 2009, Australian Traveller magazine voted Yamba the #1 town in Australia. Not the #1 beach town. Not the #1 regional destination. The #1 town. Full stop. That verdict was controversial in Byron Bay and in the various tourist offices up and down the coast who'd somehow missed the memo. It was not controversial in Yamba. The people there already knew. Here's what makes Yamba different from every other coastal town in its region. It has 11 beaches within the one postcode, and every single one of them serves a different kind of visitor. Main Beach has a historic ocean rock pool and a surf life-saving club that dates back to 1908, one of the oldest in the world. Pippi Beach is where the longboarders go. Angourie Point, a few kilometres south, is a national surfing reserve with one of the best right-hand point breaks in all of Australia. And tucked in between them are little hidden coves that most visitors never find at all. Between May and October, you can watch whales pass from the headland. Dolphins turn up in the surf with such regularity that locals barely glance up from their coffee. The local prawns, Yamba prawns specifically, have a reputation that stretches across the country. The local seafood cooperative sits right on the waterfront and sells them straight off the boats. Matthew Flinders landed on the headland here in 1799, took one look at the turbulent estuary, decided it wasn't worth his time, and sailed away. He had been sent from Sydney to find a new Eden. He dismissed it and left. He was wrong. And if you're smart, you won't make the same mistake. Number 9. Mount Gambier, South Australia. Here is something that should be geologically impossible. In the middle of a city in South Australia, there is a volcanic crater lake that spends 8 months of the year as a flat, unremarkable grey colour. And then, in November, with no warning and no gradual transition, turns into the most intense cobalt blue you have ever seen in your life. It looks like someone filled a volcano with food colouring. It stays that colour until late February. Then it goes grey again. Scientists have studied this for decades. The current best explanation involves microscopic interactions between calcium carbonate, organic material, and the warming water temperature changing how light is absorbed and reflected. It's real science. It is also completely unsatisfying as an explanation when you are standing at the crater rim looking at something that looks like a CGI render of what a lake should look like. The Boandic people who have lived on this land for thousands of years have a better story. In their dreaming, A great creator ancestor named Cratebul wandered this country with his family, building ovens wherever they stopped. Each time they built, an evil spirit drove them away. At Mount Gambier, they built their final oven, and water rose from the ground and extinguished the fire. The ancestor Cratebul, it is said, sleeps at the bottom of the Blue Lake to this day. In February 2022, the lake was given its dual name, Blue Lake/War, meaning Crow Country, or the sound of many crows in the Bungandij language. The volcanic complex that created it erupted approximately 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, making Mount Gambier possibly the youngest volcanic feature on mainland Australia. It is not classified as extinct, and it is classified as dormant. The city built around it has underground caves, a sunken garden that drops into a limestone sinkhole, a cave diving venue that attracts technical divers from around the world, and sits exactly halfway between Adelaide and Melbourne on the highway. There is no good reason not to stop here. Most people drive straight past. Do not be most people. Number 8. Coobapedy, South Australia. There is a town in the South Australian outback that produces approximately 70% of the world's entire supply of opals. Its streets are dotted with warning signs reminding you not to step on unmarked holes in the ground. The local golf course is played on squares of artificial carpet instead of grass. At the drive-in cinema, a sign once politely requested that patrons leave their explosives at home. Yes, and roughly half the population lives underground. Coobapedy sits 850 kilometres north of Adelaide on the Stuart Highway. Temperatures in summer reach 52 degrees Celsius in the shade. The first Europeans to settle here were soldiers returning from the trenches of World War I. Men who already knew how to dig, who already understood that life underground was sometimes cooler and safer than life above it. They took what they knew from the trenches and dug it into the hillsides. They called these homes dugouts. The name Coobapedy comes from the Kokatha Barngala term Coopapiti, which translates, with a certain colonial bluntness, as white man in a hole. Today, the dugouts are magnificent. They maintain a constant temperature of around 22 to 25 degrees Celsius regardless of what is happening on the surface above them. And some have underground swimming pools. Some have bookshelves carved directly into the sandstone walls. There are underground hotels, underground hostels, underground bars, and 3 underground churches, including the Serbian Orthodox Church, whose sandstone walls are decorated with intricate traditional carvings of saints, all lit by backlit stained glass. You can sleep underground in a former opal mine, in what is billed as the world's only underground campsite. Opal was first discovered here on the 1st of February 1915 by a 14-year-old boy named Willie Hutchison, who was part of a gold prospecting party led by his father. They were not looking for opals. They never found gold. What Willie kicked out of the dirt that afternoon turned out to be more valuable than anything they'd been searching for. More than 250,000 mine shafts have been sunk in and around Coobapedy since 1915. That is why the signs about the unmarked holes are serious. Walk carefully. Look where you step. And look down, occasionally, because the ground beneath your feet might be somebody's ceiling. Number 7. Beechworth, Victoria. In 1857, the town of Beechworth was bigger than Melbourne. That is not a misprint. At the height of the Victorian gold rush, more than 20,000 people lived here, with churches, banks, schools, hotels, a hospital, a prison with granite walls 2 meters thick, and a courthouse that handled more than 40 trials connected to a single outlaw gang. By 1867, the surrounding fields had produced more than 4 million ounces of gold. Then the gold ran out. The population collapsed. Melbourne kept growing. Aaron Beechworth was left with something that most boomtowns never get to keep: its buildings. Today, Beechworth has more than 32 National Trust classified historic buildings, making it the best preserved gold rush town in Victoria. The courthouse, built in 1858 from local granite, still has its original furniture and fittings. The Victorian-era streetscape is so intact that film crews use it regularly. The town has a permanent population of around 3,290 people and feels, on a quiet weekday, like the rest of the world genuinely forgot to show up. Ned Kelly is everywhere here, and for good reason. He spent time in HM Prison Beechworth. His mother Ellen was sentenced to 3 years of hard labour and served part of it within these walls. More than 40 hearings and trials connected to the Kelly gang took place in the Granite Courthouse at the end of Ford Street. The courthouse still conducts theatrical reenactments of Kelly's committal hearing, where actors play the judge, the barristers, and, occasionally, the outlaw himself. In the first election campaign of 1855, a candidate named Daniel Cameron rode through the main street on a horse shod with solid gold horseshoes. He won the election. That particular display of confidence is still celebrated each year at the Golden Horseshoe Festival. Beechworth is also, quietly, a serious wine region. The cool, high country climate produces Chardonnay and Shiraz that consistently surprise people who expected the history and forget about the glass in their hand. Number 6. Broome, Western Australia. And there is a beach in Western Australia where, at low tide on certain full moon nights between March and October, the full moon rises directly over the water at exactly the right angle to cast a staircase of reflected light across the tidal mud flats. The locals call it the staircase to the moon. Tour operators schedule boats around it. People fly from Perth specifically to see it. That beach is Cable Beach in Broome. And Cable Beach itself, 22 kilometres of white sand and turquoise water, camels walking along the tide line at sunset, virtually no surf, is already extraordinary before you factor in the moonlight. Broome sits at the edge of the Kimberley on Western Australia's northwest coast, roughly 2,200 kilometres north of Perth. Its history is one of the most genuinely multicultural in Australian colonial history. But for decades from the late 1800s, Broome was the pearling capital of the world, at one point supplying 80% of the world's mother-of-pearl shell. The divers who harvested it were Aboriginal Australians, Japanese, Malay, Filipino, and Chinese workers, all living in the same small town in a social arrangement that the rest of colonial Australia would not have recognised or permitted. The Japanese section of the Broome Cemetery holds over 900 graves of pearl divers, killed by the bends, by cyclones, by the sheer violence of the diving conditions. It is one of the largest Japanese cemeteries outside Japan. The pearling heritage is still visible in Chinatown, in the town architecture, in the red dirt roads, and in the Broome Historical Museum, but which tells the story of an industry that shaped this place more completely than almost anything else in Australia's colonial experience. Broome has about 16,000 permanent residents and receives around 350 days of sunshine a year. The wet season runs from November to April, when it is hot, humid, and prone to cyclones. The dry season, May to October, is about as close to perfect outdoor weather as Australia gets anywhere. If you go once, you will spend the rest of your life planning to go back. Number 5. Devonport, Tasmania. Most people who arrive in Devonport are on their way somewhere else. The Spirit of Tasmania ferry docks here after its overnight crossing from Melbourne, and for decades the town's function was essentially a gateway. A place you pass through on the way to Cradle Mountain, to Hobart, to the Freycinet Peninsula. And you arrived at the terminal, you got in your car, and you drove. In 2024, the Australian Tourism Industry Council named Devonport Australia's top tourism town for the entire country. Gateway no more. Devonport is a city of around 25,000 people on the north coast of Tasmania, where the Mersey River meets the Bass Strait. What it has quietly been building for the past decade is one of the most concentrated collections of cultural, food and natural experiences of any regional city in Australia. The Paranaple Arts Centre opened in 2019 as a state-of-the-art arts and cultural facility. The Bass Strait Maritime Centre sits right on the waterfront and tells the story of one of the world's most dangerous stretches of water, with the kind of specificity that makes the history feel personal. Tiagara, the Aboriginal Cultural Centre and Museum, perched on Mersey Bluff, is one of the most significant First Nations cultural institutions in Tasmania, home to a collection of rock engravings made by the Palawa people, thousands of years before European contact. And the food. Regional Tasmania produces some of the finest dairy, meat and produce in the Southern Hemisphere. And Devonport's restaurant and market scene draws directly from that supply chain with a directness that a big city simply cannot replicate. The Anzac Memorial Walk on the bluff above the Bass Strait was listed as the 8th most underrated tourist attraction in the entire world in 2024. It is 450 metres long. It follows the cliff edge above the sea, and on a clear day, you can see Victoria across the strait. Most people are still driving straight through. That is their loss, and, for now, your gain. Number 4. Bright, Victoria. There is a town in Victoria's high country that fills up every autumn with tourists who come specifically to watch the leaves change colour. That is not unusual. What is unusual is that the trees responsible are mostly European elms, oaks and liquidambars planted along the main street and along the banks of the Ovens River, and that on a still April morning when the mist sits low in the valley and the leaves are gold and orange and deep burgundy, the town of Bright looks exactly like a village that belongs in rural Bavaria or Vermont, except that it is surrounded by steep forested peaks that are unmistakably Australian, and there are kangaroos at dusk on the oval. Bright sits at an elevation of 327 metres in the Alpine Shire of northeast Victoria, with a permanent population of around 2,300 people. The town serves as the main base for the high country alpine region. Mount Hotham is an hour's drive up the mountain, and the Bogong High Plains stretch out above the tree line in every direction. In summer, Bright is a cycling destination of international standing. The rail trail that runs through the region regularly hosts road cyclists from across the country. The nearby Alpine National Park has hiking trails that range from easy valley walks to multi-day wilderness routes. The Ovens River, running clear and cold through the centre of town, is one of the best trout fishing streams in Victoria. But it is autumn, late April through early May, when Bright becomes something genuinely special. The annual Bright Autumn Festival has been running for decades, celebrating the colour change with markets, art exhibitions, and a general atmospheric willingness to simply stop and look at the trees. Come in autumn. Book early. The accommodation fills up faster than you'd expect for a town of 2,300 people, which tells you everything you need to know about how special those few weeks are. Number 3. Aireys Inlet, Victoria. Between Geelong and Lorne, on Victoria's surf coast, there is a small town that most Melburnians treat as their private secret. Aireys Inlet has a permanent population of around 1,000 people. In summer and over long weekends, it swells with city escapees who have been coming back to the same house, the same beach, the same bakery for 20 or 30 years. What distinguishes Aireys Inlet from every other small town on this coast is the lighthouse. Split Point Lighthouse stands on a headland above the Southern Ocean, white and stark against the sky, 34 metres tall, automated since 1919. It appeared in the opening sequence of the Australian children's television series Round the Twist, which means that for an entire generation of Australians, this lighthouse is the visual shorthand for mystery and coastal wonder. It runs guided tours. Standing at its base and looking out across the Southern Ocean on a grey day, when the swells are stacking up and the lighthouse beam is turning and the wind is serious and cold, is one of those moments where you understand immediately why people stood watch here. The beach below Aireys Inlet is part of the Great Ocean Road coastal experience, but without the bus tours and the crowds that cluster around the 12 apostles further along the road.
C'est pas un concept de société.
The cafe and restaurant scene punches well above the town's population. The surrounding bushwalks are quiet, bird-rich, and genuinely beautiful. If Melbourne is your base, and you want one-day trip that will feel like you've actually left the city, this is it. Number 2. Exmouth, Western Australia. A small town of under 5,000 people on the tip of the Exmouth Peninsula in Western Australia serves as the gateway to what may be the single greatest snorkeling and diving destination in the country, and one of the top 5 in the world. The Ningaloo Reef is 260 kilometres of fringing coral reef, the longest fringing reef in the world, stretching along the western coast of the Cape Range Peninsula. Unlike the Great Barrier Reef, which sits offshore and requires a boat to access, the Ningaloo Reef begins within metres of the beach.
Literally,
You can wade in from the sand and be swimming over coral gardens within minutes. Between March and July each year, whale sharks, the largest fish on Earth, reaching up to 12 metres in length, aggregate in the waters off Exmouth to feed on the mass coral spawning. Exmouth's whale shark swimming tours are widely regarded as the most ethically managed in the world. Swim numbers, approach distances, and boat-to-shark ratios are all governed under strict regulations. You float in open water, while something the size of a school bus glides beneath you with a calm, unhurried indifference to your presence. It is one of the most humbling wildlife experiences available anywhere. In 2024, Exmouth won the Gold Award for Small Tourism Town at the Australian Tourism Industry Council Awards. It is not small in what it offers, and it is small in the sense that it has not yet been ruined by its own popularity, a status that may not last the 1,200-kilometre road trip north from Perth through Jurien Bay, Kalbarri and Shark Bay is itself a journey worth making. Allow 2 weeks, leave prepared, and get there before everyone else figures it out. Number 1. Strahan, Tasmania. On the west coast of Tasmania, at the edge of a UNESCO World Heritage Wilderness that covers more than 1.4 million hectares, roughly 20% of the entire island, there is a town of fewer than 700 people that is one of the most extraordinary places in Australia. Strahan sits on Macquarie Harbour, a body of water so large it holds 9 times the volume of Sydney Harbour. The harbour's entrance channel, known as Hell's Gates, is barely 70 metres wide. In the days of Australia's convict history, ships carrying prisoners from Hobart to the Sarah Island penal colony, considered the harshest assignment in the entire convict system, had to navigate those 70 metres of churning Southern Ocean water to enter. The name was not given lightly. The convicts who survived Sarah Island are buried on its shores, which still sit in the harbour. Gordon River cruisers depart daily from the Strahan Wharf, passing Sarah Island, moving through Huon pine forests that are among the most ancient living ecosystems on the planet. The Huon pine grows at a rate so slow, less than a millimetre of diameter per year, that trees 1,000 years old are considered mature. Trees 3,000 years old still stand in these forests. You cruise past them at walking pace and understand, for perhaps the first time, what the word ancient actually means. The surrounding Southwest National Park is one of the last great temperate wilderness areas on Earth. It has no roads into it. The only legal access is by foot, by boat, or by float plane. The walking tracks that cross it include some of the most demanding and rewarding multi-day routes in the country. The weather is famously and consistently violent. Rain falls here on approximately 200 days of the year. And yet, Strahan itself is warm, welcoming, and unexpectedly good at hospitality for a town of 700 people. The pub is good. The seafood is excellent. The Gordon River Cruise is one of the best wildlife and wilderness experiences in Australia, full stop. Most international visitors to Tasmania make it to Hobart, Port Arthur, and Freycinet. Strahan sits at the end of a winding road on the wild side of the island that most itineraries never reach. That is exactly why it belongs at number 1. These are 10 towns that most people drive past, fly over, or never find on their map at all. Every one of them is worth the detour. Every one of them is the kind of place that, once you have been, becomes the answer you give when someone asks, "Where should I actually go in Australia?" If you have been to any of these and want to share what you found there, leave it in the comments. The best discoveries in travel have always come from other travellers, not from brochures. If you want more of these deep dives into the Australia that doesn't make the tourist posters, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.